the regular meeting of the DeWitt Board of Education. If you could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Stoddard, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Katrina Barnes.
Present.
Dwight Hanspike.
Present.
Jason Hanselman. Here. Brandon Stoddard here. John Tramontana. Here. Lisa Truscott.
Here.
Brad Weaver.
Here.
Lucas. I'll
Here.
start there, and then you can tell me afterwards.
Grazi.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you. A motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up is our presentation on the bond construction progress.
All right, so I have Paul Terrio who will be presenting with me today. So we're going to give an update on the bond. And one of the things that I'll talk a little bit about is just kind of what's been going on and the committee that's involved, and then Paul will kind of take it over from there. So just really want to make sure that we thank DeWitt with an overwhelming amount of support on passing the bond, with 78% saying yes. And the bond is really to take a look at several different upgrades and enhancements across the district, which include extensive mechanical upgrades. And so those will lead us to air quality, heating and cooling, and HVAC system, as well as something a little bit later on the list with the energy efficiency. So those upgrades or updates to the mechanical will help with all of those. In addition, we have technology upgrades. We also are looking at safety and security enhancements. There was an extracurricular piece for sports, and so not only athletics, but also the theater and the band and music and other extracurricular. Then the ceiling and tile replacements, pavement replacements, as I mentioned, energy efficiency, and then equipment or furniture updates or upgrades as well. So we have been busy since the passing of the bond. So each week since then, every Wednesday, we have an owner's rep meeting, which consists of several of us from the district. So Rob Spagnolo, myself, David Casada from technology, and Rick Colbro from our facilities, all really are part of that district team. But we also invite those who any of the updates or enhancements affect. So if there's a specific building, the principal attends. If there's a specific department, then that director also attends for specific meetings. In addition to our DeWitt team, we have our Plant Moran Pressa team, and again tonight Paul is here to kind of talk about the work that's been happening. But so we have several reps, and then we also have Angela Pagel, who's here from GMB, and our architects and engineers, and they have a whole team that meet with us each week as well. And then Clark Construction, we have Dave Warner, and then also Shane is here tonight to talk. Shane Lounsbury, right? I'm gonna make sure I said that right. From Clark to talk a little bit on a later adoption that we'll be asking for as well. So I will pass it over to Paul to kind of talk about what's been happening, what's happening now, and where we're going in the future. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. I don't think I've been in front of the board before, but I have been up here a couple times, kind of working behind the scenes on the project. A lot on budget and contracts and things like that, so I'm pretty familiar with what's going on. A lot to be excited about. I know when a bond passes, everyone is like, okay, what's going to be done? But as you know, there's a lot of things and moving pieces and parts that have to happen, from hiring the whole professional team to a lot of planning and design work and a lot of other things as well. So if you look back to November, December of last year, obviously a lot of work going on the stadium, on the new turf and the new track, CM services procurement, and getting the AE team under contract and on board. And then some technology, some new computer workstations and things of that nature as well. Heading into the beginning part of this year, finishing up the stadium design and some of the bidding and procurement. As everyone knows, and we'll probably talk about it in a couple of slides, the construction market's been a little bit of a roller coaster, to say the least, the last year. Prices are up and down. We've got lumber that was 200% up, and now it's back down again. We've got 50, 60-week lead times for a lot of materials out there, so it's made all of our lives a lot more enjoyable the last year. But we're hanging in there, and I think doing a good job. Obviously, we have the maintenance building that we'll talk about. I'm not going to go through all these, but you guys can kind of see some of the major things that have been going on, from technology to a lot of the design and bidding on the different projects. The stadium, turf, and track was probably the first one out of the gate, so brand new field turf and a brand new running track. I think that project came together great. Hopefully it's being put to good use this fall and next spring. So some great pictures here, kind of the after pictures. No one wants to see before anymore, I don't think. So, really exceptional project. So again, hopefully it's being put to good use. The maintenance facility that started in late September and then is projected to finish up in the spring. That's just coming out of the ground a little bit here. I think, is the steel going up already? Not quite. All right, so.
I saw some framing up there, so
Yeah.
that's exciting.
It's wood buildings. Yeah, that's right. I forgot we switched to wood. And then some roofing projects at the high school. There was a partial roof replacement as well. So you can see before on the left, that's kind of the before with some of the seams and issues there, and then after the new roof. So roofing prices have been all over the map, as you're well aware, too. It's funny, we used to budget $7 or $8 a foot for roofing. Lately, they've been coming in closer to $40 a foot. So it's definitely been a challenge in the last couple of years. Which kind of leads into this slide. So you can kind of get an idea. That's really right at when the pandemic kind of closed everything down back in April of 2020. But you can see, as I mentioned, lumber was up 150%. It has come back down quite a bit. Steel, copper, everyone's familiar with the gas pump with what oil's been doing. Now it's coming down, now it's going back up again. All those things have a big impact on the construction market. Whether it's trucking and shipping, whether it's manufacturing mechanical units that have all the same chips in them that cars and automobiles do. So there's been a lot of supply chain disruption, and thankfully we've got a good team, with G&B and Clark that are very close to those markets, and they know how to help us maybe massage the design a little bit, to do things like build things out of wood instead of steel at the right time, or maybe retrofit a unit rather than replacing it, or finding a different way to do a roofing project, or things like that. So it hasn't been fun, but it has probably made all of us get a little bit closer to our supply chains to really understand those implications. So again, some of the mitigation techniques, really when you bid projects is even more important now. It used to be everyone was trying to bid things in the fall or maybe in the winter, when you can't get mechanical units or electrical gear for 50 weeks or 60 weeks sometimes. Some of those dates have to pull up, which puts a lot more pressure on the architects to get drawings done faster. So really trying to make sure the scope is right. So as things go up 20, 30%, inevitably there's probably a little bit of scope that needs to be refined as to where we want to spend those dollars most critically. And then really scouring the budget, trying to find any money that we've saved along the way that can be reallocated, contingency dollars that can be saved in script to try to do additional things. We're not out of it by any means yet, but I think we have made some good progress on that front. So. This is kind of a peek at what's happening next for the summer of 22 and this upcoming winter. Can't believe it's going to be winter already, but didn't feel like it today. But we got obviously the maintenance building being under construction here for a little while. We got Purvis & Wood's design nearing completion, and then getting bid. The campus-wide power upgrades, and then pre-purchasing some of the mechanical and electrical equipment. Again, with those longer lead times, necessitates maybe buying those things a little bit earlier so we can get them ordered. It seems like some of those delivery dates and factory dates are getting a little bit better, knock on wood. We'll we'll see how it plays out next year, but it seems like the market's settling down a little bit with interest rates going up and some of the corporate projects kind of slowing down. It's, the public sector projects are still pretty busy, but it's helped a little bit. We'll see how that all plays out. We got some design and parking lot projects, the stadium press box, and then transportation renovations, and then obviously some new computers. So this kind of shows that rhythm, so public sector projects, K-12 projects especially, are really get into that rhythm of design, bidding and awarding, procuring all the materials, and then doing construction. So from year to year, as you work your way through the program, you can kind of see that with this schedule here. So you can see the 23, 24, 25, and 26 projects. And this just gives a little bit more detail on each of those. Again, not to read every bullet, but you can kind of see some of the highlights of what's happening at each building. I don't know if Angela wanted to speak to any of this more specifically, but you're probably a little more familiar with the plan. But
Sure, I'll stand up. So we, as Paul mentioned, we finished design of the Herbison Woods project. You can see that's kind of the first one out of the gate. And that relied primarily on the campus-wide power. So there are transformers behind this building, transformers behind Herbison Woods. All of those need upgrades. We had to work with Consumers Power specifically to get that underway. Some of those transformers are currently, as Paul mentioned, running up to 200-week lead times, which is very
which is
unusual.
4 years.
So we've been working on strategies because obviously 4 years is excessive. So we've got strategies that we're working on to get those things done quicker. We have purchased equipment ahead of time, and Shane and Clark have helped us get that underway. And then right now that project is out for bid. So as that gets out for bid, is awarded, construction begins, we're going to be kind of going down the line. As you can see, David Scott, middle school, Shady High School, and First Lawn. So all those projects we're going to kind of keep going through the district, making sure that there's a continual circulation of that design construction process.
Yeah, it seems 200 weeks seems crazy, but I'll tell you, we were doing some electrical switchovers this summer at a couple schools in Metro Detroit, and DTE called and told us they didn't have any more transformers. And we're like, wait a minute, you're the electrical utility company. How do you not have a yard full of transformers? They said, they're gone, don't have them, sorry, it's going to be another year before we can get more. So things that you would never have anticipated 2 years ago are like a common everyday occurrence now. So it's a struggle, but we have a good team and we're working through it.
What I can share is that that particular issue does not change the air quality improvements that we are able to offer. And some of those strategies for increased ventilation, improved filtration, all those things are still part of our work that are not dependent upon something that's a year and a half out. So we're going to still, that still is at the forefront of our thinking.
Yep, so there's some of that. Those points exactly about the air conditioning on Central Campus and some of the air quality improvements. Yep. Usually you can run the motors and spin the fans in those units, but when you want to run the compressors, that's when you need upgraded electrical capacity. So again, that will be ongoing. Another nice thing about all these new units is they have a lot better filtration systems than the older units would have. Filters are better. A lot of them have secondary means of cleaning the air, like ionization and things like that as well. So that's really been not just that, but the air changes that they turn over. In the old days it may have been once or twice an hour. Nowadays it's 5, 6, 7 times every hour. They're changing all the air out of every room, out of every classroom. So combine that with the better filtration, and it really does improve the air quality of the learning environment in classrooms.
Yeah, you can see the one ventilation bullet point. So ASHRAE is a code and a ventilation standard that we utilize with our engineering team. And so that recommends anywhere from 4 to 6 air changes. And at B&B, we like to start with 6. So we don't want to just do the bare minimum. We're saying, we can do better. This is good sound engineering practices. So that's where we're starting.
Yep, and you can see the stuff about filtration, and then obviously the temperature controls makes a huge difference too. In the old days, a lot of schools ran pneumatic controls that were not the best, but they were functional and made sense. Then people started to go to DDC controls. Now we're looking at obviously new controls and everything throughout the district, so that'll help a lot as well. And again, you can kind of see some of the other projects. We touched on some of these, some of the athletics, and some of the renovation projects, just kind of look sequentially kind of how those fall. Obviously, we love to do everything at once, but trying to design and plan and pay for everything all at once is not realistic, so there's kind of a sequence to it or a rhythm to it.
And what we've tried to do is get a good balance so farms can do their work really well, and you don't have construction at four sites at once when the next 3 you only have it at one. So we're trying to keep it consistent and as best we can.
Yep, that's a great point, because not only is it hard to design and bid it all, but we got to find contractors to do the work. And then no one wants their entire district torn up the same summer unless you want to drive all your staff crazy. So it does make sense to kind of stagger everything out. And then obviously there's a couple links on the district's website with bond updates that you can click on. And then as always, we're happy to take questions and answer any other questions or maybe from the board. So, thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about what the owner's rep role is vis-a-vis the other parties that are in the room here today?
Sure. Yeah, so a little bit about plan rating process. So we've been around for 27 years, I think. And we, our owners, reps, or program managers, so we help districts like yourself or other clients run big capital programs. So typically, a school district's only going to do a bond every 7 to 10 years. To have that expertise in-house to run a $60 million project or a $100 or a $200 million project typically doesn't make sense for an entity of your size, especially a public entity. So we essentially come in and help run big capital programs. So right now I think we're working in 30 different school districts all over the state, from Grand Rapids to Detroit. We just got hired by Lansing a couple of weeks ago here, and everywhere in between. So we really come in as your advocate to help make sure, one, do we have a sound plan? The things we've promised the community, do we have the budget to do them? Can we live up to those commitments? What's the best way to phase those schedules to make sure, again, that we're not disrupting the entire district at the same time or disrupting the community? What are the highest priorities? We really try to hold everybody accountable. So not only are we trying to get the architects and the CMs to perform, but we're trying to get the district to make the decisions that need to be made in order for them to draw and to design and to bid and construct. So really we look at ourselves as kind of the quarterback of the whole program. Again, to make sure that we're good stewards of every dollar that the taxpayers are funding, and to make sure that all the commitments that the board promised get executed. Not always fun when prices go up 23%, but it is doable if you have a good plan and you work that way. So.
I have a kind of a multiple questions that I'll try to put all into one.
Sure.
Can you remind me what escalation costs we factored in at the beginning of the project? It sounds like we're experiencing 23%. So
That's a great question.
I'm curious about that, and I'm curious about the impact on the entire scope of the project and what we're not going to be able to do because of those escalation costs.
We may have Rob help me answer that one, but I know typically for about the last 40 years, cost escalation was about 3 to 4%. So that's probably what we carried, was somewhere around there, compounded annually, right? So when you look at that on a $60 million bond over a period of time, I don't have the exact numbers, but I can get them for you. But we had a fairly healthy budget for escalation. And then obviously as things have gone up so fast, we're having to make some decisions, you're right. It's not that we're not doing things, I think that we're having to do things smarter and differently, like pre-purchasing mechanical equipment or electrical equipment, like maybe taking some units that have some useful life left in them and modifying them rather than just throwing them in the garbage and buying a new one, finding different ways to do a roof rather than just throwing the whole thing away. Maybe you do coating or something like that on the roof in order to stretch those dollars further. So it's not that we're not doing what we said we would, it's that we're finding different ways and smarter ways to do it, almost forcing us to stretch the dollars further. But as far as exact numbers, I can get back to you on those. And then the big variable right now is, okay, we know what happened last year. What's going to happen next year? Is my price is going to go up 5 to 8% again? And then what about the year after that? With interest rates going up so fast, it's really going to be interesting to see what happens because, as I mentioned, a lot of the corporate projects will stop. They won't be able to afford the interest rates on the loans to pencil out the performance on these corporate projects, which means there'll be a lot of bidders looking for projects to bid, like school bonds that are 5 or 6 years that are already passed, like municipal projects that are already, the bonds are already sold, and the taxpayers are funding the debt. So we think the market's going to settle back down.
At this point, nothing has come off the table in terms of what our scope is.
No, I think we've been doing some things in a little bit different order, but I don't think we've taken anything off the table.
Yeah, we've been able to work, with Clark and with the district and with Plant Moran. We've been able, and working with the staff here in DeWitt, and saying, we had an idea of what we wanted to do, and having some really great, deep conversations about, what does your building need? What's the best bang for the buck? What are you really going to see impact from, in your facilities, in your education settings? And that's what we've been really focusing on. So at this point, I feel great that we've been able to accomplish what we have. And we've just done it with a very intentional, sharp pencil.
Yeah, that design process is really iterative, right? So when we set the initial budget, we're trying to budget with some flexibility in mind, not knowing, does that mean we're putting all the units in? What kind of units? Are we doing vertical units, horizontal units, rooftop units? All those things have a different price point. This has really just made us have to focus more carefully on the implications of those decisions.
Thank you. Lisa, if I could, just to your question a little bit, I had the opportunity, I had the opportunity to meet with Art Eckert from Plant Moran this week on the 6th. Art spent almost 2 hours with me on this to answer my many, many questions. So I wanted to share with you just a little bit of what he said to that, because I had the same question. Part of that, he was talking about the initial planning was very, very strategic and well done in terms of the timing of things and the 3 series and the bonding, so as to what would take place. In particular, he pointed out that things like our furniture, our technology, and some of the more items that we could just more easily are at the end, leaving about $1.5 million, so that as we face these various cost increases or supply chain issues, that we do have the ability to move in those amounts, so they're intentionally at the end, but they're not lost. So he made some examples of some of the other things where they were talking about while we will still do what was promised, it might look a little different. They gave an example of a salt bin in particular, so I'm not going to get the details precise on the salt bin. I'm not an expert in salt bins, but one of the examples he gave was that there was more of a high-tech solution, but ultimately the space is planned, it prepares it for a future where they could move toward that solution, but it still gets the job done and allows for what that particular staff member in maintenance needs, and he's deeply involved in the process, which I really appreciated, involving those who work with that stuff on a day-to-day basis. But also, all of the things that they're doing to ensure proper internal controls, as well as abilities to save amounts. So in bidding in the off season, like they mentioned, as well as buying things in advance, that's allowing us to push against those costs as well. So I was highly impressed with their process and what they've got going on. So kudos to Rob and to Shauna and to Plant Moran and all of our partners in this project. It's very, very complicated, and I appreciated their time with me. Good question.
Yeah, not only are we working in a lot of school districts to install energy and Clark, and we're working together in a lot of school districts. So all those best practices and tricks of the trade that we're finding in other clients, we're definitely bringing here to DeWitt to try to save those dollars for you folks as well.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, public communication for items found on the agenda.
There, John.
On the consent agenda is the recommendation by Superintendent Shannon Spicker that the Board of Education approve, adopt, and accept the following items for immediate implementation and appropriate action as presented. Approval of the meeting minutes from the September 12th, 2022 meeting. The Curriculum Improvement Subcommittee from September 14th, 2022. The Treasurer's Report and bills for payment for the month of September 2022. Treasurer's reviewed and confirmed the checks, ACH debit, and purchase card for the month of September 2022. And finally, the professional hiring of Alyssa Reich as DeWitt High School special education teacher. We have a motion.
So moved. Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's the recommendation by Superintendent Shannon Spicker that the Board of Education award the 2021 Building and Site Capital Project to Clark Construction for guaranteed maximum pricing for bid package number 4, Amendment E, for this in the Woods pre-purchase project of mechanical and electrical engineering, electrical equipment, in the amount of $486,120.21 as presented. Plan Ryan Cressa and Clark Construction have provided the recommendation letters for the board to review. You should all have those. Do we have a motion? So moved. Support. Moved and supported. Any discussion?
We have them here if you have any questions about anything. So Shane and Angela are here. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, public communication for items not found on the agenda.
Chelsea.
Good evening. In over a year, I've never been able to engage and discuss anything with a board member until the Meet the Candidates event I went to last week. I asked a question, we had a respectful back and forth, and then they were all willing to have a more in-depth conversation after. It was immensely beneficial, at least from my end. Why is it taken an election to bring this forth? Before the pandemic, I regularly heard that one of the biggest problems facing educators was the lack of parental involvement in their children's education. It's not really a problem anymore, and yet parents who show up sometimes are ignored, scolded, maybe even accused of incitement on a community Facebook page by the board president simply for asking questions. Real legitimate questions that have gone months without clear answers. Why? We're here asking for engagement. Engagement between you, engagement between you and us, engagement between us and the school administrators. And, at least from my one recent experience, engagement works. But instead, the board limits our time to comment to 3 minutes, despite the rules saying something entirely different. The board president stated when asked about more open communication between you and us, quote, "Although you may not see it, I meet with the superintendent after meetings to discuss issues raised in public comment that require action," end quote. Why? Why is this done behind the scenes, and why are issues not openly discussed before us? And why do people who raise the issues not regularly receive an update or an acknowledgement? I really hope instead of all of this has been going on, we can receive more positive engagement in the future, going forward even after the election. Thank you.
Jim?
Last month I was here talking about the radicalization of the MEA and the NEA, and now recent news articles, including the Detroit News, indicates that last year the State Department of Education taught teachers the following. Taught teachers how to facilitate the sexual transition of children under their care while keeping the process secret from parents. The trainers explicitly told educators that they are to keep a student's new name, pronouns, and sexual identity confidential, including from family unless otherwise directed by the child. Even if the child is suicidal, the department recommends the school officials keep the student's sexual transition a secret from parents. As members of the school board, you have authority. You have authority to either allow this activity to occur in your school or not to allow it. If you allow it, you are complicit. If you don't allow it, you're courageous. One of the things that is talked about is your silence. The Nuremberg trials in the late 40s, I know it's history, but it's there, clearly states that individuals in authority who are silent in the face of evil is not acceptable. Is not acceptable. Thank you.
Theo?
Hi, good evening. Last month we touched base on the NAS program in the schools and how it works with teachers being certified, kids taking so many hours. Angelina, I believe you asked me a specific question on where you guys were at in that particular part. You committed to the program, but we still don't have teachers certified. It's not on the curriculum, and it's not being taught in any classrooms right now. I'd still advocate for that to be done as soon as possible so these kids have a chance to still be in this program. I believe wholeheartedly in the Archer program. Unfortunately, with the current team situation, that's a whole other story. I'd like to address that next meeting. But for the clubs in our community, we have no oversight of our clubs. If somebody's doing something wrong, illegal, or otherwise, we have no ramification as parents, coaches, to come to somebody and say, hey, this is wrong. Who can help us with this situation? I've tried to reach out, I believe, to each of you at least one time. And I'm asking maybe that we could take a vote. Find a person like Michelle Wilcox. I reached out to her. She's our community ed director. She allocates time and space for programs. She'd be an awesome person to say, hey, if you break a violation, you get a warning. If you break a violation, you get removed from the program. We need some kind of transparency or accountability when people do wrong things in programs like what I'm seeing right now. I ask that you please look into something like that to prevent it from happening again, so that everybody that wants to help the kids in DeWitt can be accountable for what they do. Thank you very much.
Pastor John Burrow. Did I get the right last name correct?
Yes. Good evening. I'm clergy, so you better set your timer. Want to give a bit of a history lesson. The context is the kind of pressure that schools around the state and around the country are finding, as particularly in social studies. And I want to offer my own history lesson. The optional assignment is to go home and read Psalm 105 and 106. Psalm 105 celebrates the history of ancient Israel, lifts up Abraham, which would be our George Washington, and Moses, which might be our Abraham Lincoln, the liberator, and just has a wonderful, totally celebrated view of that history. But Psalm 106, some wise elders, like you are wise elders here, decided that that was not an honest and open and complete history. And Psalm 106, if you read it, mentions the golden calf, the rebellion at Meribah, the idol worship when they came into the land of Canaan, and even the bitter, bitter reality of sacrificing children to the false gods. History needs to be taught balanced, honestly, fully, to equip our kids to be mature, open-minded citizens of a country that's not yet perfect. So I would encourage you, if it comes to the point where you are pressured to correct a curriculum and to leave out certain unfortunate realities of our American history, and to find teachers that will teach our country's history with great love, but with openness and honesty. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. It's been a busy week since our busy month since last month. I've had the opportunity to present with Danville Superintendent Jennifer Winnell, MASC's annual conference on a session leading well female, and thanks Lisa for attending our session. We had the Hall of Fame, which was a huge success, so thank you to Bill McCullen and his committee for a job well done. We celebrated Gold Day on September 29th and recognized several of our Warrior students who have struggled or are currently battling cancer. We've also met with our Neola rep for fall updates, and we'll have a first read next month and second read and adoption in December. Homecoming was a great success. I started the day after school with a tour for the class of 1982, who these were their high school hallways. So we had fun going through the building and seeing where they ran the halls, they told me. And after that, the parade was a lot of fun. This is my first time participating in the DeWitt parade, and that was a lot of fun. So I walked with board members. And then several of us served concessions at the game, which was also a lot of fun. I just want to say special thank you to Mike Rye for all of his help. And then also, I know a lot of the high school admin and everyone was involved to really make the homecoming a fun event with all the cancellations and everything that we had. So everybody pulled together to do just a great job for our community. And as a reminder, October is Principal Appreciation Month. So just wanted to give a shout out to all of our principals and thank you for all that they do for our buildings. As far as a strategic plan update, when it comes to communication and engagement, we have secured our student reps for our social media presence as well as our board rep. Welcome, Lucas. I've also sent out a leadership survey, so we've obtained feedback on that for my evaluation next month. Academic programs, we have the County Career Fair back on November 2nd, so we're excited to have that back. And even though Kelly Williams is retired, she is working with the county to bring us all types of vendors for that career fair. So that'll be on November 2nd up at the high school, and we're excited to be hosting that for the county. So that's all for all of the 8th and 10th graders in the county. We're also working on a gifted and talented hub, and that work is in the beginning stages, but that was part of the academic programs, one of the things that we wanted to work on, so that is in the works. As far as safety and operations, we had our September safety training. We have upcoming drills and practice on the 21st. As a reminder, both the middle school and Shavy will be closed to the public during those safety drills. And then we are also having, the state has some upcoming threat assessment in November that we'll be sending a team to as well. Currently our enrollment sits around 3,114, give or take. We're still waiting to certify all of our students, and we have about a month to do that. That's all I have for you this month.
Well, I'll just echo kudos to you and everybody who was involved in Friday. The weekend, I thought it was fantastic. I've heard so many times making lemonade out of lemons. I think that's what the district did, and it was great. I think everyone had a fun time.
Yeah.
So thank you very much to the whole team.
Sorry, two things before we adjourn. One, your presentation was great at MASA. It was a packed room. I mean, it was standing room only, actually, people all across the back, and you did a really, really good job. So thank you for that and representing our district so well. Second thing I have to say is probably not so popular, but I really feel like not tonight that we need to address the archery concerns that we're receiving, and I would just ask if maybe at the November meeting we could meet with legal counsel and talk about what we can and can't do. Because I think we've just heard enough from people that we need to do something if we can. I just don't know if we can, so I'm just requesting that we have that conversation next month.
So I won't wait too far into it, but I mean, they're an organization like many other organizations who use our facility that are not a school. I'm going to get the terminology wrong potentially, but they're not a school group.
Right.
And so we can discuss that with legal counsel and get an opinion. I mean, I think we do need to be careful because, you know, if it were DJP or Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or some of these other clubs,
you know, we wouldn't be telling them how to run their organization. But we
Right,
can definitely.
right. So that's the thing, I don't know what our role is, I just know that perception, and with our name attached to it, is that it's connected to the district, the teachers have to be certified, there is a relationship, so we need to have some sort of a discussion to know what we can and cannot do. That's my request.
We'll make sure that happens.